Welcome to Permission to Kick Ass, a podcast about leaving self-doubt in the dust, punching fear in the face, and taking bold action toward your biggest dreams. I'm Angie Coley, and let's get to it. Hey, and welcome back to Permission to Kick Ass. Making his second appearance on the show is Chris Orzechowski. Say hi, Chris.
Hey, Chris. Hey, Angie. How's it going?
Well, hey, it's totally appropriate because you're both a business owner and a dad now. So like dad jokes have to be the thing, you know?
Always with the dad jokes.
Hi, hungry. How are you?
It's just in the DNA. I think something happens that like your mitochondria, like it unlocks the dad joke power. I don't know. It's wild what happens. Evolution, you know?
Does it also unlock the obsession with the thermostat? Is that still a thing?
Not yet, but I sense that'll be happening soon, I'd imagine.
That's awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about your business and what you do.
Yeah, so I own an email marketing agency called Orzi Media, and Angie is our copy chief and creative director, and we've been working together for about 2 years or so there. And basically what I do is I just help online brands, mostly e-commerce brands, but also some brands sell some digital products and sometimes software. And basically anyone who has an email list and wants to make more money from their customer base, they come to us and we devise a strategy and do a lot of execution for them. And sometimes that's creating automations or helping them with their launches or helping them with their, ongoing weekly messaging strategy with their emails, pretty much everything in between. So yeah, that's the gist of it.
I've loved working behind the scenes. Not only is the team really awesome and we have a lot of fun, not only do I occasionally call you and tell you, hey, I'm going to Disney World today. Can we push that meeting back till tomorrow? But we've also just done some really amazing things for our clients. And that's not to brag, but it's really helped me with some of my own coaching students who struggle with like pricing or seeing the value in their work. And when I can point out like, hey, look, we just created one email sequence that's done like $50,000 in its first week. So when you're looking at pricing and you're worried about whether they want to pay you $100 in email, that's not the thing to look at. Like, let's look at the value add that you are bringing to their business, not the words and the price. So you've been undergoing an interesting transition lately, which I think is really cool because you and I both started in freelancing around the same time. Like we went through RFL with Kevin, and it's like we're always talking about Kevin on this show. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to me because I'm going through this shift myself, right? There's kind of a freelancer mindset that evolves into a consultant mindset when you're doing this kind of creative work. And now you are taking the next evolution from consultant into CEO. Do you want to talk a little bit about that evolution?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, that's for sure. Freelancing is it's awesome. It really is. It's to just be able to it's simple. It's a very simple business model. You think it's complex when you start out. I remember I did, mm-hmm. But then after a while, you master it. It's like once you know how to get clients and you know how to do what you're good at, you get into this really awesome sweet spot. And what I found was when, it might take a few years, but if you are really good at what you do and you have a specialty and you become known for that specialty, you can get to the point where, $10,000 months are the norm. And then you get to the point where you're doing $15,000, $20,000 a month. And, maybe you have some expenses, some software expenses, some education expenses, maybe like a mastermind or a couple of newsletters or things that you're subscribed to. And maybe your profit margins are 75, 80%. So you think on a $20,000 a month business, you're taking home 16 before taxes. It's a nice life. It's a really nice life. It's pretty, even if you're only doing 12 or 15 or 10, even that's to be able to work from home on your computer and have complete autonomy and work asynchronously. It's a really solid setup. But what happens is sometimes you get a little bored, right? Yep. And I know that sounds almost glib for me to say, right? I'll admit but the thing is, sometimes you do get bored. And I got to the point where I was like, what's next? Mm-hmm. I'm very much into saying, oh, I want to do this new thing and figuring it out and working really hard until I figure it out. And then as soon as I figure it out, I get bored and want to do the next thing. And I'm sure there's probably a lot of people out there who are like that. So for me, the next thing was, moving to consulting and kind of reinventing the business there, but it still felt a lot like freelancing. And the only thing was, instead of me being able to just go and get the result for people, I had to use use psychological mind games to get them to get the result that I want them to get. So like, it was almost harder. It was almost like, you know what, just let me write this for you because I can't like do Jedi mind tricks on you today. Like I'm tired. Let me just do this and solve the problem instead of teaching you how to solve the problem. And whatever, like it depends, like sometimes consulting's awesome. Sometimes it feels like that though, but still it felt like the same thing. And then I said to myself, people have agencies, and I always, I'm a big fan of Mad Men, and I was always like, man, it'd be so cool to have my own agency. And I didn't know what that involved, and I just knew that I wanted to do it. And I said, maybe it'll be a fun little experiment to figure out. And like, okay, God forbid it doesn't work, I could just go freelance again. Like, what's the big deal,
Mm-hmm.
So I took my nice cushy life, my $20,000, $25,000 a month freelance business, and I blew it up. I destroyed it and said, okay, you are no longer going to offer this, and you are going to have to now figure out this whole new direction of, managing people and, mobilizing your own people, your own team, and creating systems and pulling systems out of your brain and putting them onto paper and making sure your stuff is so good that you could literally hand it to someone else and they can get the same exact result that you can, or at least close enough to where it makes sense. And then you're going to have to be okay with that. You're going to have to be okay with the work. And then you're going to sit in the CEO chair, which is very different than like people like to, you go on social media and everyone's got like CEO in their bio, right? Like CEO, I'm my own boss. And like, when you're a freelancer, like, you're like, yeah, okay, maybe you are, but it's like you're riding the bike with the training wheels on. And then once the training wheels come off and now you're careening down, a cliff with obstacles and, like fire shooting up from canyons, like that's the bike ride you're on now, right? Like it's a completely different landscape, right? When you have a team and when you have payroll, and I always like to say, like, nothing matures you faster in business than having a payroll, because, people like to go on social media a lot and they like to say, oh, well, I know so much about marketing and blah, 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 blah. And this company should be doing this. And like, these guys are so dumb. And okay, yeah, maybe, but maybe they also are juggling a million balls at once and you have no idea what's going on in their business. And, it's a totally different beast.
That's my biggest pet peeve, especially when I see folks that are newer to marketing and they see something that's happening from the outside and it doesn't immediately make sense to them. So they proclaim that this is a stupid strategy or this isn't really going to get them results. I'm like, is it though? Is it? You have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. And this ad that you think is stupid could actually be crushing it, which might be the reason that they're actually running it like over and over and over again, despite the fact that you don't like it. Maybe you're just not the audience here. So when I see people shooting their mouths off, I'm like, you don't have enough data, sweetheart. How about learn a little bit more first?
Yeah. And on top of that, it's like, I don't know, sometimes people point things out to you, but like, hey, like you're doing this with your funnel, but like, you really should be doing this. Or like, yeah, you had a typo on this upsell page. Don't know if you noticed. It's like, well, thanks for pulling that out. Like, we just lost $20,000 in monthly recurring revenue. I'm trying to solve that problem right now. And like, maybe the typo can wait till tomorrow, like maybe there's a bigger fish to fry. And that's the thing. Like when you are the CEO of your own business and you have a team, it's like, there's a different set of priorities about what's important. It doesn't mean the little things aren't important. They absolutely are. But like the way that you go about solving problems and thinking about how you spend your time, like, all of your time is spent in capital allocation mode. And like what that means, capital allocation just means like you have capital, which is money, right? Because what happens is once you solve, and me and as you were chatting about this earlier today, but there's this book that Ashley from A Squared, Ashley Berghoff told me about, written by Mike McCall. It's called Fix This Next. And he has this whole like system. I haven't read the book, but I remember she was kind of walking me through the essence of it. Basically, there's like this hierarchy of needs in a business. And like one of the lowest hierarchy of needs is sales. And like a lot of people, they build a business and they might not ever move past that stage where like they have sales figured out, right? And I'm putting air quotes around figured out. But like once you have sales figured out, what that means is that you have offers and you have services and you have ways to bring in money consistently and predictably month after month. Like there might be peaks and valleys, there might be fat months, there might be lean months, but there's always, you have ways to bring in money to your business. You have offers that are proven that work. And once you solve that, that is like a whole new world of, okay, well, what happens after you figure out sales? What happens after conversion is no longer a problem? But how do you grow? How do you take that money that's coming in, that free cash flow, and apply it in the right direction? And the thing is, it's not just necessarily about cash flow too, because what you learn when you have a team is that, okay, well, now I have 4 people who are on retainer, right? I have 4 contractors. And okay, how do I direct them and be a leader and help you set the right initiatives to make sure that we're going to continue to grow this thing. And these people are going to be able to protect their roles essentially and keep bringing in money while also investing in money for future growth and being okay with leaving one marshmallow on the table so we could have two in the future. And that is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I was taking notes while you were talking. And one of the things that I wrote down and circled a couple of times is this idea of control. Right? Because you actually have the most control in the freelancer stage of this evolution. You get to execute it the way that you think is the way. You get to make your argument to the client who sees you as the expert. And it's great, right? You can generate a lot of results, a lot of goodwill, a lot of word of mouth that way. Then you evolve to consultant. And I love the fact that you said Jedi mind tricks. Like I laughed so hard because especially a lot of people that are still in the freelance stage, they think it's just like they're completely gobsmacked when I say, yeah, people pay me a lot of money to not listen to me. Mm-hmm. They're like, they can't even fathom a world where that's the case. And I'm like, they're hiring me for outside perspective. And if what I say vibes with them, which hopefully it does, they'll execute it and get great results. But there's also like team dynamics. The owner might be completely on board with what I have to say, but they're getting pressure from their team to go in a different direction. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff I can't control beyond what advice I give. And then after that, I just kind of have to let them handle it how they would handle it and be available when they have questions if they chose a different direction. And like Jedi mind tricks, we've talked about this a lot because I'm pretty good at when I call inceptioning people. Yeah. I'll ask questions in such a way to where they eventually are like, you know what? I had this great idea. It's actually the thing I said 15 minutes ago in the form of a question, but it's their idea and they want to run with it. Fantastic. I don't care who gives credit as long as we run it.
It's a skill. Definitely, it's a very difficult skill to develop, but it's very valuable, you know?
Mm-hmm. And then like evolving into the CEO, as you said, now you've got these contractors. I'm one of the contractors, but that's why I wrote that word control, because it's interesting to me. Like you have a little bit less control in every evolution, the further up you go, which is interesting because people who haven't yet been an actual CEO, right? They're still in the early stages of their business. They think the CEO is the ultimate control factor. Like I control everything, and you actually don't control a whole lot.
Yeah, you can't, because as the company grows, there's more and more roles and there's more and more functions and offers and infrastructure and operations and those things. And what I've learned about being a CEO, and listen, I'm not like Steve Jobs here, right? Like I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I've learned based off what I've had to learn. It's a lot about capital allocations, a lot about leadership, and it's a lot about like setting vision and then just making and really like hiring and getting the right people on the bus. And, we've made some good hires and we made some not so good hires. Right. And you can always tell, because when you make a bad hire, it's like when, there's like an organ transplant, except the organ transplant doesn't take because the blood types don't match or whatever, like however that works, like the body rejects it. Right. And like that's your organization is kind of like a body and everything's got to function, function properly. And there's kind of like a intuitive feel to it. Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing. That's a whole nother skill. Like everyone's like, oh yeah, I'll be the CEO. And like, I'll be the man, right? I'll be the man. Yeah. I'm the CEO, but like, okay, do you know how to hire people? Do you know how to fire people? Do you know how to delegate? Do you know how to create infrastructure? Do you know how to create management structure? Do you know how to analyze your free cash flow and your expenses and look at a P&L month after month and say, okay, do we need to make any changes? Like, what do we need to do for next quarter? How do we set the 90-day initiative? Like, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't go to business school. I mean, like I got a master's in special education. My major was sociology. Like I didn't do business. So I had to learn all this stuff, essentially like in the trenches,
Yeah.
And each week you just learn a little bit at a time, but it's definitely a crazy evolution that you go through, but it matures you fast because you have to, because that's the thing, like when you have payroll, it's like you don't have the same luxuries of just being very theoretical about things, I guess.
Oh, yeah. And I love that you brought up the idea of like, you didn't go to business school. Incidentally, I don't think a lot of people know that I did. I have a master's degree that's it's not an MBA, but it's a hybrid creative business degree. I learned a lot about how to turn creative ideas and intellectual property into businesses. And I would say also, while I was in school, the business classes were the least interesting to me because it was all theoretical, like you said. But once I got into business and I had a concrete application, my own business, suddenly the stuff was a lot more interesting and I'm learning a lot more than I ever did in the classroom while it was all still theoretical in other people's businesses. So I just find that fascinating. I also find it fascinating that you brought up Steve Jobs being the ultimate CEO, because there's a story about him that not a lot of people know. So I love researching things like failure, just to show people that like even your heroes can fail. Did you know that Steve Jobs was fired from Apple once upon a time?
Yeah, I've read that in his biography. Yeah.
He was fired because he was obsessed with this idea of perfectionism, and it was totally toxic to his teams. And after a while, obviously he got that maturity. He came back, he became the leader he was. But that I tell that story not to make you scared, but hopefully, to everybody that's listening, even Steve Jobs fucked up and got fired. It's just a learning process and you're going to make mistakes and missteps. But yeah, I think you have been doing great as a leader. I'm a little bit biased as a member of the team, but I've definitely worked with people who micromanage or like they criticize or they otherwise do things that feel intuitive to them, but are actually like counterproductive. It's interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's all about like goals and incentives, right? And I know like my ultimate goal is to just do nothing. And it doesn't mean I just want to like sit in the room and like stare at the wall, but I know that like I'm on the treadmill running as fast as I can. Actually, this probably isn't a good analogy. I'm trying to think of one on the fly, but like, I know like we're sprinting and we're doing a lot of things, put a lot of infrastructure in place, but it's like, we do these sprints to either create an asset or a piece of infrastructure or a role for someone. And then once it's set, then like I could hop off the treadmill and they could hop on. And again, it's not a great analogy, but I'm kind of fishing here. But yeah, I'll think of something better for episode 3. But that's what it is. It's like I'll sprint now, so that way someone else I can hand the baton off to someone else, right? And that is part of the job too. It's like your only job as the CEO is to like replace yourself from all of the crucial, or excuse me, as a business owner is to replace all of the functions that you do in the business. Yeah. And I'm driven by the desire to do nothing. I'm driven by the desire to do nothing so that way I could do other stuff that interests me, because that's the thing. Like I get bored. I like figuring stuff out. And there's people who are, certain people are built in terms of like the way that their minds work for different things. It doesn't mean anyone's worse or better. Like the person who starts McDonald's is not the same person who scaled McDonald's and grew McDonald's, and not the same person who oversees 3,000 locations around the world today. Like those are all very different roles and different entrepreneurs. It doesn't mean one is better or worse than the other. It's just people are meant to play different roles. And like, I know that my role is probably not the person who's going to manage the thing long-term and be the good steward of the business for the next 30 years. It doesn't mean I'm not going to be involved. It just means that I'm going to be off experimenting and tinkering and launching new things and playing in my lab, instead of worrying about being the person who's going to say, okay, how do we hit that 15% growth year after year and incrementally increase and, mature the business that way. So, and again, like maybe that changes in the future, but at least now in the season of life that I'm in, I'm doing what feels right, not worrying about, there's just different strokes for different folks, I guess,
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting too, because I know in the world that we're in, we're both leaders in marketing, particularly email marketing and copy. And I've had a lot of people ask me why I haven't created a copywriting course. And I'm like, there's so many good courses out there. I don't really care enough to create a good copywriting course. And I think that's part of the reason that you and I work together so well is you teach copy amazingly well. And you already talked about how people management isn't necessarily the thing that you want to do. And that's where I come in, because you've got the course and I'm a good people manager and a good teacher. And it's just like such a symbiotic, really good relationship. I've had a lot of people that I've coached in other programs that are like, oh, wow, but like Chris teaches copy and you teach copy. And how does that work? I'm like, I don't know. We talked about it and I took over for the things that he wasn't really interested in that I'm super passionate about. I love nurturing the talent, the copywriting talent that we have on the team. I'm really good at shepherding them in different directions to help them get the best possible ideas. I'm also really good at inceptioning the clients and preventing things from blowing up. and I have fun with all of those things, where that's not necessarily something that you're interested in doing. Would you say that's accurate?
100%. Yeah. And that's the thing, like, it's all about energy at the end of the day. It's like, what are the, like, in terms of like, if you were going to create a copy course, like, can that sustain you energy wise for the next 5 or 10 years? Because that's the thing too. Like, people are like, oh yeah, we'll just do a course. And like, listen, courses are awesome. I'm not going to sit here and say that I regret creating any courses. I love courses, but courses are a business. They are a full-time job, and people don't get that, because what happens when you have a course, then you need a list. You need to continue to grow the list, because you need to feed leads through your funnels. You need to develop the funnels. You need to optimize the funnels. You need to gather, user generated content and feedback, and then improve the product and improve the marketing assets. You need to bring on partners, maybe, if that's part of your strategy, or you need to figure out paid traffic, or you need to figure out how to get more publicity and media appearances. You need to figure out, okay, people are trying to pirate my course. How do I, fuck them up, essentially, right? Like, how do I ruin their lives? And sue the shit out of them. Like, that's another thing too. You got to, no one tells you about. Well, I'll just do a course. It'll be great. And like, yeah, it can be great and it can be scalable, but there's a lot of different things. And you say, okay, with the money that I made from this course, where do I then take that cash flow and reinvest it so I can continue to get returns from this offer, and so that the offer doesn't go stale or die? Okay, someone else has a similar course. Now they're stealing some of my market share. What do I do to innovate? So again, I'm not trying to scare anyone off from doing it, but I'm very much a believer. Like, one thing I've learned, because I feel like for, this is year 9 of my copywriting career, I have, and I think a lot of people, I don't think it's just me who does this. I think a lot of people are guilty of this, but like that, the grass is always greener syndrome, right? Like, the grass is always greener when I'll do freelancing. And then you do freelancing, you're like, you know what? I think the grass is greener if I was going to do consulting. When you do consulting, and you say, the grass is going to be greener when I have digital products. And they say, actually, you know what? This is cool, but maybe the grass is actually greener when I do at the agency. And then you do everything on the list and you say, okay, all of these things actually have problems. There's no perfect solution. And part of growing up as a business owner or being an adult in general, saying, okay, all these things have problems, and that's fine, but which set of problems do I want to deal with every day and deal with for the next 5 or 10 years? And then just being a big boy and saying, okay, I will voluntarily deal with this set of problems, so I could also deal with or have these rewards that come from this particular thing that I'm invested in. It doesn't mean any of these options are right or wrong. It's just, different strokes for different folks, I guess.
Oh yeah, I love that. I've heard it phrased as like trading up with your problems. Because there's definitely this thought in entrepreneurship that if I just get the right course or the right strategy or the right product, somehow all of my life problems are magically going to resolve themselves. And that's not really the way it works, folks. One of my other mentors phrased it as pick your pain. And I really like that. It's like so every potential challenge or thing that really excites you and gets you fired up to get going is going to come with its own set of pain. So you get to choose, like, do I want the pain of staying comfortable and knowing that there's potentially more, but I don't really want to pursue that? Do I pick the pain of this is new and unknown and I have no idea how it's going to work and it could potentially get complicated, but let's do it? Like, there's going to be pain with every single challenge you face.
Oh yeah. That's a great phrase. Pick the pain. And another thing too, that you mentioned, like, you think you'll do this thing and everything, like all your problems disappear. Like, even with the money, like that's the thing that I've realized, like, because I remember when I did RFL and we did the RFL dollar exercise, and you write down like how much you want to make. And like my ultimate goal was like 20K. And I think it took me about 14 months till I had my first $20,000 month. And you think like, oh, you hit your goal and you're like, oh my God, like the clouds are going to part and like a ray of sunshine is going to shine down and the heavens will sing and the little birdies will start, chirping by you. And it's just this magical moment. Time stands still and like everything is right. And finally peace and calm. But like what happens is you hit your goal and then you say, oh, okay, cool. Or, maybe celebrate, right? But then like you still got the same problems. And then what was really weird for me was like, we don't hit this every month, but like when you have $100,000 a month and you're like, holy shit, I did 6 figures in a month, right? And you can never even imagine that. You can never even fathom, because when you worked at your day job, you made $54,000 in a year, and how you made over $100,000 in a month. And that's top line, not profit, obviously. Yeah, we're talking about, right? And you think, wow, when I can make 6 figures in a month, like that's when my problems are going to disappear. And then it happens and you're like, oh, wow, well, my problems didn't disappear. I still have problems. In fact, I may or may not even have more problems than I had before. Again, it doesn't mean that it's not worth it. It is. It's just knowing like, okay, when you get to $200,000 a month, when you get to $1 million a month, like there's no magical number where you're ever going to be like, okay, now I can finally be happy and content, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no magic number where you're like, okay, everything in my life is right. Like you're always going to have to work on everything. And it's like, once you accept that fact into your life, everything, like a lot of your stress disappears and a lot of your fear disappears, because, like we have months where we'll spend $70,000,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to vomit. We get, there's one month we made like 75K. And then I think our expenses, and we had to pay like $19,000 in taxes that month too. So I think it was, $75,000 came in. It's like $72,000 went out. I wanted to vomit. And I was like, geez, like this sucks, like that was one of my bigger months at the time. And I was like, man, like this is great. We made so much money. And I'm like, man, there's like nothing left over, but it doesn't mean every month is like that. Like I said, there's fat months and lean months, but you just get okay with that. You say, okay, well, this is just business. And this is just, okay, well, how do we make it better for next month? And what do we have to trim? Where can we make more sales? And what can we do to expand or create new offers or change up our pricing? Or, there's always another problem to solve.
Mm-hmm. I love that too, because the way that you just phrased that was, okay, so how do we solve for that? It wasn't taking the mindset that like, oh shit, we brought in 75 and 72 went out. Like I'm fucked. I suck at this business thing. I'm never going to figure it out. It was okay. Where do we trim expenses? Cool. To bring that 72 number down. Where do we add in more sales so that we can bring the 75 number up? Okay, cool. That's like problem solving mode. I think is such a rare skill set in these days. And I say that being someone that used to not be much of a problem solver. I think I told somebody on a recent podcast episode that I appreciated my old copy chief when I was still working in a day job so much because of his ability to pull me into the office and be like, could you close the door? Could you sit down? Like, let's talk about this. Because I have always had the ability to like zoom in and zoom out. I can see the big picture strategy and I can see all the little details. That's one of my superpowers. And when I was still developing this superpower, I had this nasty habit when I was an in-house copywriter of just telling people that this is going to be a problem. All right, if we do this course of action like 6 months ago, 6 months later, this is how this is going to turn out. And this is a big problem. We need to do something about it. But notice that like we need to do something about it. I never actually had something for us to do. So one day my old boss pulled me in and he was like, so I think it's great that you can foresee these challenges coming and know that we could head them off. What would really help me is that next time you find a problem like this, you also bring me a solution. And I was like, oh shit, you're right. Just pointing out problems without having any potential solutions is bitching. That's what I've been doing. I've just been bitching.
Yeah. I mean, because and that's the thing, like with that new level, new devil thing, like It works both ways because like, yes, it works when like things are going good, you're making more money and you're like, okay, I'm at a new level. Now there's new problems, but it also works the other way where like you realize the problems you do have, like, wow, I've been complaining about these things. Like I look at Peloton and like I wrote about this in my newsletter, how I was so pissed because I thought just Peloton was just, they had a great run through the pandemic and like I was buying stock and slowly adding to my position. And then I just, took my eye off the ball and didn't sell when I should have and took a big bath on Peloton stock. And part of it was like, they were doing HBO. They got trashed in what was that show? Sarah Jessica Parker, and just like that, right? Yeah. That new Sex and the City show. And then in Showtime on Billions, there was another guy who like had a heart attack in the show after going on Peloton. And then all of a sudden, they missed earnings, and then and then the CEO stepped down and they hired McKinsey. McKinsey told them, "Hey, stop producing bikes and fire like 20% of your staff." And like it's just like beating after beating. Mm-hmm. And I just saw what was going on. I said, you know what? I don't have those problems. Like, sure, like, okay, I lost some money in the stock, but like, I'm not the CEO of that company. Yeah. And man, if I was the CEO of that company, those are real problems. You know what I mean? Like, this is like 1,000 people or plus got laid off. You know what I mean? Like, those are bigger problems than what I have to deal with. So like me worrying that like, oh my gosh, we spent a little bit too much money this month, or this client fired us, or like, okay, in the grand scheme of things, like there's bigger problems in the world than what I'm dealing with. So that's the thing. Sometimes it's okay to be like happy with the problems that you have and realize like, oh, I don't have to deal with, all these other bad things that other people have to deal with. I'm actually kind of fortunate.
Oh yeah. And that brings up an interesting point for me, because of this idea that we talked about back at the beginning with like hiring people and learning how to lead people. So in my role in helping run the team, and this fact that I help manage the clients. We had an interesting situation once where we had a client that was paying us a really nice 5-figure retainer per month to run all their emails. And also there were a lot of miscommunications that led to a lot of stress. And eventually one of the writers on the account reached out to me and was like, I cried today. This is stressing me out so much. I don't think I can work on this account anymore. And immediately after that happened, I came to you and I was like, okay, so I know what I'm about to ask is a big ask, but maybe we need to consider parting ways with this client, because if it comes down to losing this writer who is amazing and who knows our systems and who can get up to speed on new accounts really fast, and losing this client who, that's great at tying into what you were saying earlier with like the payroll concerns and stuff like that. Woohoo. I think we could find another client, but it's going to be a lot harder to replace this particular writer who has a lot of skills. And I don't know, maybe you have a different recollection of how that conversation went, but I remember being so nervous bringing that up to you and like, I really hope that we can keep this writer and I don't really care about the account anymore.
No, I mean, and it happens, right? Like, and that's the thing, like what I've learned in client services as a general rule for like anyone, whether it's copywriting or email marketing or whatever you're doing, is a couple of things. Like one, you got to kiss a few frogs to get to your princess, right? Like that's one thing. The other thing too is like there's a gut feeling and an intuition, like when you have a good client, and it's kind of like the same thing as like like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, like their philosophy of investing. Like they'll buy a company and they say, I'm going to hold this company for the rest of my life. And that's how I feel about clients. Like there's certain clients, like I look at like Carnivore Snacks, I look at Satchel and Page, I look at Laptop Empires, I look at, Kevin Rogers, and like that, we do maybe a project or two a year with him. There's clients, Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? Yep. Where I'm like, I want to work with these people the rest of my life. I really enjoy them. They're awesome clients. We always produce good results and it's an enjoyable experience. We're on the phone, we're laughing, we're having a good time, kicking around ideas. There's good creative energy. So like, again, like my, dream clients will be different than yours, everyone who's listening. And that's fine. They should be, right? Because we're all different people with different, things that give us energy. But, that's the game. The game is trading up and trading for different clients and finding the people. Like by the end of your life, you should have a handful. By the end of your career, you should have a few dozen people who you say like, David Ogilvy, when he started his agency, he wrote down like 5 dream clients that he wanted to work with. And by the time he was done with his career, he landed all 5 of those accounts. Right. And now I don't necessarily know if they were dreams because of the status of the accounts or the money that came with them, or whether they were just genuinely good people and they had good relationships, or maybe, who knows, maybe it was a combination of all 3 of those things. But what I believe is like, from the service side of things, like your life can either be awesome or it can be living hell based on the clients that you pick. And it doesn't mean if the client relationship is a living hell, that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the people behind that business that you're working with, right?
Yeah.
Like they could be like, we've had a lot of clients, some clients where the relationship was just not great, but they're awesome people. Like I could have a beer with these people. I could hang out with them and, we could like, I could be friends with them in real life, right? Like they're awesome people, but from a working relationship perspective, it was just hell on earth. Yeah. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with those people because, we all play different identities and different roles in our lives, depending on the context of the situation that we find ourselves in. So, I know this is kind of like a meandering, long-winded way of saying all this, but I think that, what I think about clients is like, there's always another one, and eventually you'll get to the ones that you're meant to be with.
I love that. And I love that you pointed out the energy too, because I think that's something that we don't talk about enough in business, especially if we get married to this idea of like, I need this one account or something like that. Yeah. But how do you feel in servicing that account? Are your employees coming to you crying like ours did to me? Like, am I burning one relationship in favor of another? Am I choosing money over the ongoing relationships that I have with my staff and my contractors? So I think energy is valid. Do I dread getting up and going to work? Or like, I think one thing that makes us work so well together is I love getting up and checking the Slack channels and seeing what's going on and what new projects we have. Like the team is actually so much fun to work with, and the clients that we attract are so much fun to work with. And that was the other thing that I love that you said, if you work with enough people, if you kiss enough frogs, you eventually find the people that you love working with. And at that point, when you have that kind of solid relationship, it doesn't become about the money. It's like, okay, what could we do together next? because we work so well together that I know whatever we're going to work on is probably going to turn out great. So let's figure out how we can work together next. I love that.
Yeah. And that's, I think the future of work, I know that's a bit of a deviation, but like the future of work is that it's people getting together and saying, how can we create something cool? And it doesn't necessarily mean it's defined by 40 hours a week, Monday through Friday. It doesn't necessarily mean full-time versus part-time. Like, I don't know. I think this is still very early, but when you look at like all the stuff happening with like finance and crypto, and like, I'm not going to sit here and say I understand all of this stuff completely. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, especially with the tech stuff, but I'm learning a little bit each day and starting to understand a little bit more and more. But the way I think the world is going to go, especially with the gig economy and remote work and all these things, is like, who's to say that you can't, like the way that we built Orzi Media, it took a lot of figuring out, and we're still figuring things out every single day. Like the company is a weird company because yes, we're an agency, but we also do training and education. We also do coaching. We do consulting. We actually have 2 coaching programs. We have digital products. We have books. We have a lot of different stuff. And the thing is, everyone works part-time, and we get so much stuff done. Everyone works part-time. Like no one's really full-time. And like, okay, sure. There's some weeks when like everyone's all hands on deck and like we're just like burning the midnight oil. And there's other weeks when like, Angie will hit me up and say, hey, I'm going to Disney World, and say, cool, and have a good time. And, hit me up on your back. Right. But who's to say like, why can't you run a company like that? Why can't you have your people do that? Right. There's all these fractional roles. Everyone talks about like a fractional CFO or fractional CMO or fractional whatever. And I think that's the future of work. It's just like, hey, we need this thing done. You want to team up and do this thing, and here's the incentive for you, and yes or no. And then like, I don't know, I just think that is the way, maybe 10 years, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, the whole world will look like that. It might take a while for this to be adopted, but it seems like things are kind of going that way. So the way I think about building the company is like, how do we build it in a fun way where everyone's enjoying the work we do? And, we can do deals with people where it doesn't necessarily always have to fit into a salaried type relationship. Like there's pros and cons to that too. But I view it like a pirate ship, right? Like who's on the pirate ship? Who knows where the next island is that we're going to go plunder? And I know that has like a negative connotation, but like, that's kind of the way it is, right? It's kind of like, okay, who's coming along for this journey with us? And we don't know what lies ahead. We don't know what's going to be on that island when we get there, but we know that there's treasure there, right? In this new project that we're going to create. And we don't know how much treasure, but we're going to go and, sail over there and figure it out.
I love this. See, on multiple levels, both the pirate ship and in the business world, Orzi Media taking over and just changing the way how shit is done. I love it.
Right.
All right. This has been fantastic. We're definitely going to have an episode 3. Tell us a little bit more about your business, where to find you on the internet, all that jazz.
Yeah. So my main site is theemailcopywriter.com. You can grab my book, Make It Rain, get a free copy, PDF copy. Just enter your email there somewhere. There'll be a pop-up box somewhere. You can find a little bit more about, who I am and stuff we do. And then if you want to work with the agency, you can go to orzymedia.com. That's ORZY media.com. And that's our agency site. You could fill out an application to speak with us. And that's pretty much it.
Or you can join the coaching programs and get a little bit more one-on-one feedback with both me and Chris. It's fantastic.
I should probably give that a plug too. Yes, we have the Winner Circle, which is myself, Angie, and Matt Spangler. And we basically do a group call every single week. It's a small group coaching program. We get to work pretty intimately with people. And the way we like to position it is like, you get to work with our agency without having to hire our agency, because you get to use us for the strategy and guidance and feedback and messaging and all those things without having to pay the markups that you normally pay whenever you work with an agency. Because obviously every agency marks up labor and puts a premium on things, which, hey, that's fine. In the right situation, that might be okay with you. But if you're someone who has a team and you just need training for that team, or if you're someone who wants to learn how to do it yourself, but you still want guidance, you still want someone looking over your shoulder and helping you out every step of the way, the Winner Circle is our program where we do that. It's super affordable. It's $4.95 a month. I don't think you could ever hire any kind of agency for that affordable of a fee.
Oh no.
When you think about it, it's like less than $6,000 a year. Like you can't even join any kind of coaching program for that. So we think it's pretty affordable. It's a pretty sweet deal, and people are getting awesome results. They're doubling, tripling their email revenue, getting like insane, per email, sales numbers and things. So, if you have a good business, it might be a good place for you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Chris, and I will talk to you later.
Thanks so much, Angie.
So that is it another awesome episode of Permission to Kick Ass on the books. If you want to know more about the show, if you want to know more about me, Angie Coley, and the mission I'm on to help entrepreneurs punch fear in the face and do big, bold things, then head on over to permissiontokickass.com. That is all one word together, permissiontokickass.com. Make sure to sign up for my email list so that you know whenever there's a hot, fresh, and ready podcast episode out for you. And also on Mondays, I like to send out a little newsletter called Kick Monday's Ass. I'm sure you're totally surprised by that. So thank you for being here with me today. I'm Angie Coley. Make sure that you share this with a friend that needs to hear this message today. Like it, share it, comment wherever you're listening to this today, and let's go kick some ass.